Coming up on show 829, the Citroen Boss says he thinks there's big EV demand post-pandemic. Stick around, we'll tell you more. Plus, Tesla now taking reservations for Cybertruck in China, why the Model 3 is the best car of the year according to one famous publication, how many EVs are being sold in Germany, and why Mercedes-Benz investing in cell-making themselves. We'll find out. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening in the world. Welcome to EV News Daily for Saturday, 4th of July. My name is Martyn Lee, going through every EV story so you don't have to. And if you are celebrating a long weekend or a holiday weekend or a 4th of July weekend, I hope you are having fun, whatever you are doing. Right, we'll start with the news that Tesla has now opened up reservations for the Cybertruck to customers in China. Now, this is a move that will test China's appetite for massive, futuristic-looking trucks. The reservations page on Tesla's China website was first posted online in a Reddit channel at r/Tesla Motors, and the website Electrek reported to confirm as well. Says TechCrunch. They say that Tesla is now testing potential market interest amongst Chinese consumers, and it is possible that China may well go for it in a way they haven't gone for trucks before, but they are going into a market which isn't really well known for. Same as here in Europe, really. We don't have the truck market that the US has. In China, that's a lot to do with the emissions regulations in and around cities, but of course, this is all electric. So I wonder how many will want to go for it. It is impossible to predict how many reservations will be made in China. Of course, in the US, we know that it's off the scale. The last report that I saw was from a financial analyst, and we know how accurate they are with everything, like predicting the delivery numbers, but this one was reckoning about 650,000 reservations so far. So, the confirmed numbers, I think, were around 500,000. When the Cybertruck starts to be built, they will certainly have more reservations than they can build vehicles for. It'll be more than a year before there are any answers, though. Tesla hasn't even finalised the decision of where it will build the vehicle. They have the space, actually, in Shanghai, and they are, at the moment, full steam ahead in building the buildings that are going to make the Model Y, and, of course, ramping up Model 3. But I'm sure Cybertruck, and by the way, just to hit reverse gear, cell production in China. But I'm sure that there's room for Cybertruck, and that's very much part of the roadmap. And now we know, if you're in China, you can make a reservation. Well, the Tesla Model 3 just received the New Car Awards from 2020 AutoTrader, which is a big marketplace here, and the competition was attended by more than 100 cars. AutoTrader say they thoroughly test them all, and they use 16 different criteria, things like space, performance, reliability, looks, which of course is very subjective, costs and more. According to Tesmanian website, this year the Model 3 became the overall absolute winner, and it also took place in the first place in the categories of power, acceleration, economy, safety, which will please Elon, performance, driving comfort, ease of parking, demonstrating impressive capabilities. AutoTrader so happy they announced that Tesla Model 3 overall best car 2020, and of course we are delighted with whatever electric car wins any of these kind of awards. In Germany, they're just warming up to the idea of EVs. Now, Germany is Europe's largest car market, and according to Clean Technica, they saw plug-in car sales, passenger vehicles, so plug-in car sales hit a market share last month in June, as they were coming out of the pandemic, of 8.4%, significantly up year on year. 3.4% same time last year, and now 8.4%. Over the first half of the year, so the first 6 months of the year, the overall was 7.7%. So it's growing, and that looks like it's going to grow further in the second half of the year. New government incentives have been announced in Germany, which are very, very favourable. Dr. Max Holland is the person that had a look at this and says that of the 18,600 plug-in sales in June, over half were pure electric cars. Over half were plug-in hybrids, and almost half were pure electric cars. About 45% were BEVs. If you're new to the podcast, BEV, battery electric vehicle. You'll hear me call them BEVs sometimes, and I try and remember at all times that there's people listening to this show who are well aware of the terminology, and some people, probably the first time they're listening and learning all the terminology, interested in EV, so I try and make sure I remember everybody. Well, no data yet on the actual models for June, but if you look back at the top 3 in May, the Germans love their e-Golfs. And VW are still making them. A car that over half a year ago was supposed to be cancelled, but of course the ID3 then got delayed, and then everyone in Germany and other European countries suddenly fell in love with the e-Golf. And so 6,000 of them with the e-Golf in May. Also loving the Renault Zoe, 5,500 of those, 3,500 Model 3s from Tesla. As for the plug-ins, which are popular, Mitsubishi Outlander and the Volkswagen Passat. The GTE. There's also a Golf GTE. I like the GTE, by the way. It's a nice mix of performance, flexibility. You can pick and choose your powertrain, and which is in use at any particular time. But if you do floor it, you get maximum power from both engine and battery. And for those just not ready for a pure electric car, and by the way, I think that there's plenty in the market now, at least coming by the end of the year, that will suit many price points. That argument is wearing thinner and thinner, that there is not the right car out there for people. But if you need an estate, a Passat estate or something, then yeah, a plug-in hybrid version could well be right for you, and the Germans do seem to like 3,000 of those sold in May. Mercedes-Benz are looking at the future of their supply chains and realizing they've got to get serious about cells. It's why they've just bought a stake in a Chinese battery cell maker called Farasis Energy. And it's also launched a strategic partnership with them as well. The automaker's owner, Daimler, said yesterday on July 3rd, and according to S&P Global, under the partnership agreement, the two companies, Mercedes and Farasis, will collaborate in the development and industrialization of highly advanced cell technologies. And working on things like energy density and reduction of charging times, the partnership gives Mercedes-Benz a secure source of cells to make into batteries for their electrification strategy, and Farasis security now for its planned construction of production capacity, knowing that they have a customer ready and waiting, because that customer's a shareholder and they'll want all the cells they can get. What about charging, though? Well, Allego is a charging company. Allego has launched an upgrade program to improve their chargers, and specifically the charging experience and reliability of their HPCs, high-powered chargers, HPC means, in Europe. And it's intended to address some of the criticisms aimed in their direction. Says Electri, for one thing, the displays on the first generation high-powered chargers. Now, when we say high-powered charger, in my mind, it's 125 and above. So 125 kilowatts all the way up to 350 kilowatts. In my head, that is what I define as high-powered charger. I don't think there's any one definition that absolutely everybody agrees on. Some of the charging companies have their own definitions of fast, rapid, ultra-rapid, HPC. But for me, once you get to a sort of 100 and 125, really, you start to get into that kind of rarefied air where there's so few cars on the market now that can take advantage of those speeds, but there won't be for in the next year, there'll be plenty of cars out there that can charge quickly, not just things like the Audi e-tron. Well, a software update is also coming to the Allego stations. That will improve connectivity and interoperability with a growing number of models. And it's surprising, I don't have access to those high-power chargers in this country, but I certainly, I'm a big fan of Bjorn's videos in Norway, where there's high-powered chargers every 5 minutes, it seems. And he's lucky enough, because it's Norway and the EV market there is crazy, he gets to test a lot of these vehicles earlier than it's available in right-hand drive countries that I can do. And so I've seen him testing a lot of the cars recently that are on the platform, like the Peugeot E208, the DS3 Crossback E-Tense, etc. At the moment, this week, he's got himself a Honda E. And the amount of handshake issues with chargers is really surprising to me. I thought that a new car would just work out of the box. I thought that the car makers would make sure that these things work with all of the different charging networks out there. Particularly with the Honda E this week, I've been watching the live stream, and he's had awful problems with plugging the car into these high-powered chargers. Less so the slower ones that are, more established. But the new chargers aren't working with the new cars, and they do eventually, 3 or 4 attempts, or sometimes he gives up and moves on. It shouldn't be happening. That should not happen. And it's good to see that a company like Allego are putting software updates out there to improve the interoperability with the new models which are hitting the road, but it shouldn't be an issue in the first place. But it's good they've got teams and engineers and devs working on these situations. As for upgrading programs, well, in Germany, it covers 48 high-powered chargers there, I think, and Lego getting more chargers. They're not as big as Ionity, but certainly a network that are wanting to charge your car quickly. We mentioned Citroen a moment ago, well, DS, but let's talk Citroen. And the Citroen boss, Vincent Kobe, I think, or Kobe, maybe I say his name, believes the impact of the coronavirus pandemic could lead to a sharp rise in demand for EVs in the very near future. And I would agree with him. Speaking at a launch event for the new C4, that's the EC4, a fully electric variant of the C4. And of course, it was an electric event, and the C4 is coming, again, on that same platform, like I mentioned, with the Peugeot E208 and E2008. This is a 50 kilowatt hour battery pack. It's 100 kilowatt charge speeds. It's on the EC4, the Citroen EC4, it's 217 miles of range. It's pretty good from 50 kilowatt hours and attractive price points. I don't know the price point for the EC4, but Citroen always sell on price. They always sell on value, and it's not going to be an expensive car. Now, the EVs, which Citroen sells, or the cars with plugs in, make up 6% of the sales mix of their parent firm PSA Group, but he reckons, according to autocar.co.uk, that it's going to rise sharply post-pandemic. He does note, the boss of Citroen notes, that there is a higher purchase price at the moment for EVs, and that is a potential deterrent to buyers. But, he said, and I quote, anyone who's worked in the car industry in the last 10 years will know the huge challenges EVs present in terms of battery and development costs. But as citizens, we know that if an EV costs roughly the same as a combustion car, we will shift. End quote. Let's talk Tesla, making a push towards fleet vehicles. There's a company called EIQ Mobility. They're a startup, they're a data science company. Now, they've been doing some work with Tesla. And of course, Tesla is doing a lot of fleet work at the moment and working with fleet buyers and fleet managers. And they've been presenting a new standard metric. They've called it the EV design mileage. And that's all about determining whether an EV's range can satisfy the daily operational requirements to replace the combustion cars they have in their fleet, says the website Electrek. Well, they say when fleet managers figure out that the range of EVs now is more than sufficient, they will run the numbers and they will figure out that when you save your gas, when you save your maintenance costs, electric cars are cheaper per mile. We talk about total cost of ownership, so maybe fleet managers and fleet buyers, those that buy a lot of cars at once will be looking at total cost of ownership, so they'll amortize all their costs over 3 years and realize that by the end of that period that they're better off either leasing or financing EVs than leasing or financing or buying, possibly, like I mentioned, buying EVs. And I don't imagine there's too many fleets that are out there buying outright the cars. Many of them will be doing it on finance. But then when you look at total cost of ownership over the 2, 3, 4 years time, but then you go to the bottom and you look at the pence per mile, also a number that fleet managers and fleet buyers will be looking at. Even when you compare Tesla Model 3s with a car that's in a class well below, like a Corolla or a Camry, the pence per mile over the lifetime of having it in your fleet is so much lower as well. It's a no-brainer. And so Tesla have been talking about this and running webinars for fleet managers. They say, and I quote, "We are hosting our 4th webinar to cover everything you need to know about Tesla and running EVs as part of your fleet. We will provide a brief history of Tesla, including who we are and where we've come from. But more importantly, we'll cover what matters to fleets and company car drivers, the benefits to employers and employees, as well as technology, charging and safety topics. We're also inviting you to ask any questions that you have on running EVs as part of your fleet, so we can make sure the session provides you with all the answers you need." End quote. There is still a section of the car industry at places quite big which believes in hydrogen and fuel cells for personal mobility. Now, anyone that's listened to this podcast more than 5 minutes will know I disagree vehemently with using hydrogen and fuel cells for personal mobility. I don't want to swap the current behaviour, which is people taking their combustion cars to a filling station, which is owned by a very small handful of people, and those companies dictate the price of the fuel you put in your car. We have a once-in-a-lifetime generational opportunity to change how we move around. And that should be, it should be walking, and it should be cycling, maybe e-bikes or e-scooters. And yes, when we need a car, and there should be fewer cars, we know that, it should be electric cars that can be charged on renewable wind and solar. And I want the option of having solar on my roof. Or even, if I live in a community with lots of solar power feeding back into the grid, knowing that my car is being charged on renewable power. I want that option. I don't want to just go like for like and have this opportunity, and then all of a sudden we find ourselves with fuel cell cars, and great, now we have to go to a filling station like we did before, at the mercy of a very small cabal of companies that choose, it's all a big game for their own profit, that choose the price we pay for the fuel we put in their car. I just don't, let's get away from that model. And so some car makers are convinced that hydrogen's right. Jaguar Land Rover are getting more involved in hydrogen fuel cell development, and it's going well beyond tinkering. In a media Q&A, they just did an update on Friday. Jaguar Land Rover's Executive Director of Product Engineering, about as high as you get in terms of knowledge of these things, Nick Rogers, has been clarifying the project that was reported earlier this week. And Nick underscored that there's potential for Jaguar Land Rover cars because they make big cars. They make big, Land Rovers and Range Rovers. They don't make small cars. And so for them, according to Green Car Reports, he said, and I quote, "We truly believe that hydrogen has a real place and opportunity, particularly in the bigger vehicles," end quote. Well, look, that has to do with big battery packs. So, firstly, if you haven't secured yourself a supply of cells, and I don't know if Jaguar Land Rover have or not, but if they haven't secured themselves those contracts years ago, by the way, then they're going to be left out of the EV revolution. And it's going to be a tough ride. And obviously, cars are made in the UK. I want that company to do well. I'm proud of the country that I live in that makes those cars. They have real problems if they haven't got themselves sorted for battery supply already. Partly it has to do with how big the battery packs have to be if you make big cars. So if you're making Range Rovers and Land Rovers and huge off-roaders, you need big battery packs and you need lots of cells. But also, they're heavy. And you need to put big battery packs in to give long range, and buyers of those cars are spending a lot of money. You're up in Tesla Model X territory. And if you want to convince them on buying a battery electric car, you want to do that at a price point that they are comfortable at. And you realise you can't sell those Range Rovers for the same price if you're going to put batteries in, and you haven't got competitive prices on the battery. So they are moving, by the look of it, their language towards hydrogen. And that's kind of a concern to me. They could well be right. Look, I'm an idiot on a podcast, just speaking my brains. Could well be very, very wrong on this, but I would like them to be looking at all technologies and not talking up hydrogen so fondly. Hydrogen, by the way, before you think I'm anti it, for fixed installations where you need a higher energy density, so marine and aircraft where there's a point-to-point travel, and you can put those, especially if you can produce hydrogen with excess renewables, and that's not a given, by the way. It's definitely blue sky thinking. It makes sense. Energy density is higher at the moment than battery technology, and you can put a smaller battery into that boat or plane, or even for shifting goods. You can have filling stations at depots, for instance. Well, then you can have a smaller battery pack of. It depends, actually. If it can be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 kilowatt hours, but much smaller, much lighter. But I'm not convinced for the rest of us. Right, let's finish off. We're talking about Audi. And here's a fun story to finish off. The training grounds of Bayern Munich, the football club Bayern Munich, are getting ready for the Audi e-tron. Mercedes have just given the go-ahead to put 38 charging points into the training ground of Bayern Munich. Now, the charging points are going online later in the summer, just in time for the start of the new Bundesliga season. And at that point, all the very, very well-off professional football players, soccer, if you want me to call it that. It's called football, but what can you do? Football players of Bayern Munich who drive their very nice, luxurious Audi e-trons and e-tron sportbacks to the training ground will be able to fully charge when they're there. Of course, Audi have a partnership already with this football club, so I'm sure that there's a more Audi e-trons in the training ground than the typical football club. But at the start of next year, Audi are also looking to make that partnership stronger and equipping the Allianz Arena in Munich with lots of charging points so that fans and visitors to the stadium can charge there as well. I don't think too many people are probably driving to the stadium on match day, but still, staff and service vehicles and all that kind of stuff. It's great. I love stories like this. It's really positive. Email me anytime with what you think of the stories we report on the podcast. If I'm right, wrong, and whether you agree or disagree, it's okay. We can still be friends. I love the EV community because people can disagree in a friendly way, unlike the rest of Twitter where it's all banging heads and everyone hates each other. But I get emails from people saying, hey, I like the show. I disagree with what you said about XYZ or car, or, you talked a bit too much about Tesla, but, or not enough about Tesla. I can't get it right all the time. But, we can still be friends and we can disagree. I'd love to hear from you, or leave a comment in the YouTube show and we can have a chat on there. Well, there are 827 previous shows in the... It's 828 previous shows. I lose count. In the archive, and that archive is paid for by Patreon, which is a platform where individuals and companies can support things like this. And if it's you supporting the podcast, thank you. Premium partners are Phil Roberts of Electric Future, Brad Crosby, Avid Technology, big engineering company here doing amazing things in the EV space here in the UK. Brightsmith Group will look after your clean tech talent requirements. Porsche of the Village, Cincinnati, Audi of Cincinnati East, Volvo Cars of Cincinnati East. Some very pro-EV dealerships there. And also in the US, nationalcarcharging.com, who will hook you up with your chargers, and Aloha Charge, their Hawaiian sister company. Have a wonderful day. Catch you tomorrow, and remember, there is no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.